Hi, I'm Trevor Conquergood from Floriani, and welcome to this week's R&K Software Club's video of the week. And the topic for this week is going to be cutwork. And I've taken one of the, custom shapes from the software and converted it into a cutwork design. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about how you actually stitch out a cutwork design. And then we'll take a look at, how you can convert your own embroidery designs into cutwork using the Floriani software. And so the trick is, and I'm just going to show you a couple of photographs. You see, when you do a cutwork design, you have to use your scissors and remove a piece of the fabric. And so you can see here that I've simply got my fabric in the hoop, and so what happens is, when the very first color of the design stitches out, it's a run stitch. And then, let's just rewind. You have to hoop up your fabric with wet and gone. And so this fabric, if I show you a close-up, has wet and gone underneath it. So in the hoop together, you have your water-dissolving material, your wet and gone, and your fabric over top. And you can see the first color of the design is a run stitch that becomes kind of like a little container that says this is the shape of the hole. And so you have to very carefully take your scissors and kind of pierce through your fabric, trimming up to that run stitch as close as possible, but not trimming out the wet and gone. That wet and gone needs to stay in the hoop obviously that's what sort of allows the design to stitch over top of it, because essentially the next portion of the design is going to create the stitching to create the border and what we call the bridges. Okay, these little bars, sometimes people call them Richelieu bars, but they're actually bridges, and the FTC-U software makes it really easy to create a design like this. And then essentially when you're done, you can get the wet and gone wet. So after it's done embroidery, you get that wet, and you have like an actual voided out area in your design. And it's a really easy to use tool, so I'm sure you're going to find that this can be a lot of fun. I created a design recently for the R&K Software Club's free monthly designs, and so you'll find that if you search for January 2020, that there's a beautiful new cutwork design that you can give a try, and maybe I'll record a video about that design sometime soon. But right now, let's just take a look at this simple heart. You see, essentially, the heart came from our custom shapes, and these are little vector shapes that come with the software, and the heart was one of them. Okay, and it looks like I made the heart a little bit larger. Generally speaking, it could be any size you want, but you kind of have to have a certain amount of space before you're going to want to try and trim your sort of hole with your scissors. So that said, I don't know that there's any kind of guidelines, but if I did make it cutwork now, I think what would happen is, you see how it puts a border around it? Well, there wouldn't, if this shape was much smaller, that border would start to kind of on this sort of smaller side of the shape here and maybe here. There wouldn't be any hole. It would just be all border. And that's why probably I chose to make it a little bit of a bigger design like this. And then essentially the tool's down here at the bottom. Okay, it's right here, Auto Cutwork, and I'll just go ahead and click on it. And it has essentially created the steps to making this design a cutwork. And the only thing is, the tool is waiting for me to tell it where to have those bars, those bridges. So when we clicked on it, the software created the steps to sort of trim the hole out, which I'll show you in a moment, but it's waiting for me to literally just click and drag, and I can click and drag as many times as I want and put in as many of these bars as I want, and I can put them essentially in whatever direction I want, and that's really entirely up to you where they go. But I usually try and make them go kind of directly across, and see how I can, even though I've already made this one, I can still adjust it by just, mousing over the points and then moving them, and I can keep clicking and dragging to add these little bars, and make as many as you want, make them as balanced as you want. You can always edit them later, so don't feel like this is your only chance at the bars, but essentially you draw in as all these little bars. And then when you right click, now the software says, where would you like the entry and exit points? And so you can move those green and red entry and exit points around, and then when you right click, it's done. And so it's kind of as easy as that. If I was to, here, let's just get rid of the original one for a minute and show you what I've just created. So we've created an embroidery design from a piece of artwork of heart. It tells us that it's a cutwork design. If we look at the segment here, you'll see that there are colors to it. So color 1 is carrot, or I guess orange, color 2 is green, and color 3 and 4 are both the same, Russian violet. And that's just simply because maybe you want to separate the color of the bars. In other words, I could come in here and make the bars a different color than the border. But normally we usually sew the bars and the border in the same color. And so, as you probably already know, you can change these colors by simply clicking on a color in your sequence and coming down here and clicking on the color in your color selector. I, of course, have mine set on a custom color palette that I like to work with that has 48 colors. I kind of call it my favorite 48, but of course, and that's one that I created myself, and we've learned about that on a different day, but essentially you can create your own thread charts, and of course you can use any kind of thread you want. And so if you would had your software set for the Floriani polyester, then you would have lots of choices, and you could click on the first color of your design and essentially set it to be at whatever color you want. So coming back to Cutwork, once I select this shape, notice that my properties box now talks about the Cutwork segment that I've created, and the preferences can be adjusted. So notice there's a little option here that says border. If I click on it, I can change it to bridges. So that's how you adjust the settings for your bridges and the settings for your border. So settings for the bridges could be things like the run stitch length, the width, the density, and then the steel finish, the width and the density for that. So essentially, the bridge has kind of like an underlay. You'd have to really kind of imagine that this is going to be sewn onto water dissolving stabilizer. And so, on that bridge, there's a certain amount of underlay. And you can come in and use the properties box to come in and adjust the bridge underlay width or density. So it's set at 2. If you're like, I wish there was more, make it a smaller number and click apply, and you'll see more underlay get added to the bridges. If you're like, I wish the bridges were the same width as the border, you can come in here and change the width to be a bigger number. So let's try 4 millimeters. And so that'll make that bridge wider. And so same thing with the underlay on the bridge. You can control the width of the underlay on the bridge. So really, as you change the parameters, the results of the stitching get updated. And if I change it to be a border, so now I'm working on the settings for the borders, and same kind of idea. How wide do you want your border to be? What density do you want the stitching to get? What kind of underlay and how much do you want for that as well? So that is kind of the cool thing about the Floriani software, is that within one little click you can create a Cutwork embroidery design, and then if you want, you can go in and adjust things like the widths of the borders, etc., etc. So yeah, if you watch this design stitch out, the very first color of the design, that is the run stitch that is like the container of the whole. And so when it reaches that end of the first color and the machine stops, that's when you take your scissors and you trim. And of course, there's instructions in your sequence. Before proceeding, cut away the fabric on the inside of the cut line. Make sure not to cut away the water dissolving stabilizer under the fabric. So, kind of helps you out along the way. Color number 2 is a tack down color. It's essentially goes around the sort of other side of the hole, the one that you didn't trim away, and it does a little zigzag, kind of like stepping onto the fabric and then up to the edge of the hole again. I guess that just certainly ensures that the fabric and after you've cut that hole out, that everything's sort of nice and secure. And then it goes ahead and does those bridges. And so again, I've made them their own color. but as you know, that's completely optional. You can use the same color. Essentially, I would use the same color for all of these color stops when I stitched out this design, but the final color of the design is the border itself. And you guys, it's basically as easy as that. You can take any shape that you've got, even, take a shape out of a design that you've got, select your shape, click on the Cutwork tool, and it will create a Cutwork embroidery design. And even if you just right click, then it won't make any bridges, and it'll simply create the steps to do the Cutwork design of the shape that you've made. So again, the bridges are optional. Now, bridges, since I didn't add any to this, and I had said on this one that I can edit them later, just to show you how to do that, you would select on your shape, and then you would go into actually shape mode, where you can interact with the points of your design, and now all of your bridges are fully editable. So it's if you feel like, I didn't get enough of them, or I didn't balance them enough, you could right click and say add inclinations, and so essentially those are what the bridges are called. When you're in here is an inclination, but when you're doing Cutwork, inclinations is equal bridges. So how's that? So that's kind of how you can go in and edit them or add them afterwards. So select on my shape here, go into shape mode, right click, say that I want to add one of these little bridges or inclinations, and then go ahead and draw across my shape. Right click to kind of finish that command, and there you've got it. We created a Cutwork design, and well, my bridge kind of makes it look like he's wearing diapers. But anyhow, you guys, that is all of today's recording. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the new Cutwork tool. I call it new because, of course, when I first started using the Floriani software, we didn't have a Cutwork tool. And it's one of the things I love the most about Floriani is that we keep creating new tools for our customers to make designs like this easier and easier to create. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the Cutwork tool and get lots of use out of it. Until next time, have a great day. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye.